We're grateful today to have Fred Guttenberg with us. He works tirelessly against the horrors of gun violence and for reasonable gun safety laws. We will begin our meeting by recognizing that today is Veterans Day. I would like all the veterans to stand, please. Next, will all family members of servicemen please stand, past and present. Thank you for your sacrifices. Don't sit down yet. It's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For all. Yes, you can sit down now. For our moment of silence today, I'd like to stand in memory of those who served and of those senselessly killed in our epidemic of gun violence. Just a moment. Thank you. If you haven't signed the petitions yet, they're in the back of the room. They are for reproductive rights or clean and healthy water. Also, Luann Cooter is here from Lake County. So if you're from Lake County, you can sign a petition to get Stephanie Duke on the ballot. Thank you. Past club president Bob Jansen will now introduce Fred Guttenberg and act as discussion moderator. Afterward, Fred will take audience questions.
Thank you, Diane. Good morning, everyone. You know, this past Tuesday, Democrats won a lot of big elections. Much to the surprise of the pundits and everyone else, we need to keep this momentum going. I was talking to Fred before. One of the things that we heard was that the abortion issue was big. Well, guns big as well. But we can't just come to these meetings. We need to get involved to get people elected. So that's one thing that's an aside, but I think it's really important. So as of October 31st, our country had 520 mass shootings this year. 621 were killed, 2,126 were injured, more shootings than days in the year. After almost every one we heard from politicians, our thoughts and prayers are with those who lost loved ones. May they rest in peace. And they remained in peace. They haven't done anything after, have they? Our country has 120.5 guns per 100 residents. Our Florida legislature, urged by our governor, passed bills this year making it easier to purchase firearms. We're in Florida going in the opposite direction. Guns are an existential threat to our citizens. Today we're fortunate to have with us someone working tirelessly to address this issue. In February of 2018, Fred Guttenberg's 14-year-old daughter, Jaime, a freshman at Marjorie Stone Douglas High School, was one of 17 victims brutally murdered in the Parkland shooting. From that day forward, Fred's life would be forever changed. While grieving, Fred found himself unable to stand still. The day after the murder, he attended a vigil, and while there he was asked to speak. That was the start of new public life for Fred. Fred and his wife Jennifer now spend much of their time challenging our elected officials to do more and aggressively pursuing strategies to bring the grip that the gun lobby has on our elected officials through their nonprofit organization dedicated to Jaime's life called Orange Ribbons for Jaime. They established this, and we're going to hear more about that later, because this is one way we can support this effort. He has been a regular on TV news programs and myriad of online and print media. We're lucky to have Fred with us. He's also written a number of books. The most recent one, American Carnage, Shattering the Myths that fuel gun violence. If you haven't read it, you should, because it really does shatter the myths, and it helps us as we try, as a nation, change these. And then he had two others, Find the Helpers, What 9/11 and Parkland Taught Me, about recovery, purpose, and hope. And the third one, End Gun Violence, Essays, Prayers, and Poems. Fred will give an overview of facing his own daughter's death to his journey to becoming an activist. Since then, this will be followed by a Q&A session. After that, Fred will be available to sign books. He did some before. We're going to work really hard to finish by 11. Fred's 23-year-old son's birthday is today, and so congratulations. And that's down south, so we want to get him back here for that. So after we're finished, some of the questions were already sent in. I'll ask him those, and then assuming we have time left, we'll ask questions from the audience. Fred?
Thank you.
Welcome.
So the third book you mentioned, The End Gun Violence, that's actually my American Carnage co-author's book. But Find the Helpers and American Carnage, that is me. I've been on the road all week, actually. Was in Houston, flew in from LA last night. I actually got to the hotel just before 1 a.m. And this is my last event of the week before I get to go home for my son's birthday. So I am truly excited to be here. So thank you all for having me. Listen, this could have been any of you. And it's the reason why I do what I do. Before I get started though, I want to give you all a chance to kind of come into my world a little bit. And I'm going to ask you all to do me a favor and to go to a happy place. Close your eyes and imagine yourself at one of these villages parties that I hear about, or with your grandkids, or with somebody who you love doing the thing you love to do most. And just close your eyes and imagine yourself there. I'm going to give you all about 20 or 30 seconds to be there. People always say to me, I can't imagine how you feel. And I apologize for that, but I've spent the past 5.5 years doing everything I can to get people to imagine how I feel, because I need you to be a part of helping me solve this problem. February 14th, 2018, which is Valentine's Day, Day of Love, was my wife's favorite holiday. Woke up, normal day in my house, with one exception. I was going to introduce my children to the whole notion of romance on Valentine's Day that day. This crazy dad went ahead and took his wedding video that his kids hadn't seen because it was on a VHS tape and digitized it. And I was going to finish up the work that day. And for my family, this Valentine's Day mattered more deeply than others. For those of you who know my story, 4 months prior to my daughter getting killed, my brother Michael, 1 year younger than me, died of cancer related to his service in 9/11. My brother was a physician. He was the deputy medical director of the New York Fire Department. He was across the street from the World Trade Center when it got hit. He was in the World Trade Center before the second building got hit, and he was hiding out in the World Trade Center with his team of 10 physicians when it collapsed. And amazingly, the room that they hid out in, it was in a connecting building between buildings 2 and I believe building 7. They hid out in a garage. While everything around them turned to rubble, this room didn't collapse. And these amazing heroes were the doctors who actually started the original triage for the World Trade Center, my brother amongst them. Unfortunately, between breathing in all that stuff in that moment and 16 days of ground zero, my brother got pancreatic cancer in 2013. Surgery, chemo, and radiation. He seemed like he was going to be okay, and then he came back in 2016 and he died in 2017. I'm one of 5 kids. My family has never been through loss before. So it was very hard on us, and my wife and my children and I were finally healing. And that's why this Valentine's Day for me was a bigger deal than most. I sent my children off to school. Again, a perfectly normal day, and normal in the sense that they were running late, they were blaming each other. And my last words to my kids that day were, you gotta go, you're gonna be late. Not, I love you. And I will live with that forever. The day went on as a normal day when just after 2 p.m., my son called me and he said, hey, Dad. I'm like, what? He said, there's a shooting at my school. And my son is a jokester, so I didn't take him seriously in the first second until he said, and I can't find Jaime, because he looked after his sister like a hawk. He would put himself at harm's way in order to make sure she was okay at any given day. And once he said that, I knew he was serious. And then I started asking questions like, well, where are you? And he says, well, I'm on the campus, I have to find Jaime. I said, no, you need to get as far away as possible. He's like, no, I can't find Jaime. And they're telling us to run, but I can't find Jaime. I said, you gotta run, I'll worry about your sister. And as I'm on the phone with him, I hear boom, boom, boom. Those were the shots on the 3rd floor killing my daughter. I heard it through the phone, he heard it loudly and clearly. If anybody wants to know why I do what I do and won't stop, it is because you all have people you love, and they need to be safe. You need to be safe. Your children and grandchildren deserve to grow up in a society where gun violence isn't their biggest concern. We need to live in a country where we can actually talk about this without it becoming, well, you want to do something about gun violence, so you're anti-gun, or you're anti-Second Amendment. No, it's not that. I hate gun violence. I don't hate gun owners. I don't hate the Second Amendment. I don't hate the Constitution. I hate gun violence. I want to do 3 things. I want to lower the gun violence death rate. I want to lower the instances of gun violence. I want to reduce the injuries and severity of gun violence when it happens. You know, as I'm talking, I'm also looking at my friend in the back of the room who's keeping us safe. And for those of you who know my story, you know some of my best friends in the world, in fact, my closest friend, is a police officer who actually is the person who identified my daughter. Gun safety is police safety. The level of and volume of arms out there puts our law enforcement at risk as well. I'm going to tell you just a simple little fact. My daughter would be 20 years old. 20 years ago, when she was born, we were just under 200 million weapons in America. Today, we're over 400 million plus ghost guns. 20 years ago, when she was born, AR-15 sales were fewer than 2% of all guns sold. Today, only 20 years later, over 25%. I just told you everything you need to know to understand why we have more gun violence in America today. We literally have a 20-year problem. It's not all the slogans, it's not all the myths, it is the reason why I went out and wrote this book. It's not only non-gun owners and Democrats who agree with me. Over 80% of America agrees that we need to do more to solve the problem of gun violence. That includes Republicans, that includes Democrats. It is the reason why one of my closest friends today is former Congressman Joe Walsh. Many of you may remember him, one of the original Tea Party Republicans, also one of the original Republicans in Congress to get behind Donald Trump, until that presidency began and he said, "What did I do?" But he is a very conservative guy. He is a serious gun guy. But he and I found a common place because he believes we can do more and better to reduce gun violence in America. I don't want to restrict his rights. I want to make sure those he loves remain safe and healthy. The election this week, a lot of people have talked about it as all about pro-choice. It was far more than that. It was about freedom. It was about freedom to choose. It was about freedom to be free from gun violence. It mattered. And it happened, and the results happened because people voted. Listen, we live in a state where in the last election, one party showed up and voted and the other didn't. It's really quite simple. And it doesn't need to be that way. If you're not okay with the way things are, you don't have to love a candidate. You don't have to be inspired by everything they say or do. But if they have your values, if they want to do the things you want to see done, whether you love them or not, you got to get up and get out, and you got to vote, and you got to make sure everyone you know joins you. There is nothing more important right now than all of us getting out and voting. Now, I have a few more thank you. How am I doing that? I know I just have limited time to deliver comments. I want to say a few more things and then we can get to the questions and answers. I see you all wearing orange, and I want to tell you a little bit about that. My daughter's favorite color was orange. And the day she was killed, for those of you who know about my daughter, she was a beautiful, magnificent, competitive dancer. The day she was killed, all of her dance sisters got together with the dance studio and made thousands of orange ribbons for us to just give out at the funeral and over the course of that week. And when I was delivering her eulogy, I talked about the beginning of an orange ribbons movement. I really had no idea what that meant on that day. I just saw everybody with their orange ribbons, and I knew it was going to mean something. For the next few weeks, every day I left the house, I always had my orange fabric ribbon. One day, about 3 weeks after the shooting, I was in a Home Depot, which in hindsight, I think about this orange sign, and someone came up to me and asked me what the orange ribbon was for. And when I told them, they said, "Do you know that's the color of the gun safety movement?" And I had no idea. This was not a part of my work. And that was the day that I went home and I said to my wife, we need to start a movement, a foundation, and I want to call it Orange Ribbons for Jaime. And my intention was to take that color and turned the orange ribbon into a symbol of the movement, which for those of you who have paid attention now, you see people wearing orange ribbons all the time in relation to this movement. And that's how Orange Ribbons for Jaime was born. It is, the foundation's intent is, yes, to educate on why Jaime's life was cut short, but it is also to honor who Jaime was and what she stood for in her life. And in Jaime's life, a couple things about my kid. She despised bullies. And she would, in school, always put herself in the middle of a bully and the person being bullied, and she would make it stop. And to the point where her dad worried about her safety every day, because every time I would tell her she needs to stop doing that, she would tell me, you underestimate me because of my size. Because my daughter was a petite little thing. But she despised bullies, and she used to get involved in anti-bullying programs, and so do we. My daughter also dedicated her life to children of different abilities, and was a part of a lot of different programs that she volunteered for, working for kids of all different abilities. In fact, she's part of she was part of, and we still are, a program in South Florida called The Friendship Journey, and by someone who I've kind of considered my adopt daughter, Sam Novick, even though her real grandparents are here in this room somewhere. But that's who Jaime was. It's what she did. The other thing about Jaime was she was obsessed with her dogs. And I tell you that because 4 months, well, right after my brother died, my wife's birthday is October 30th. And sitting around the table just after he died, I said, what do you want for your birthday? And she said, honestly, the only thing, we already had one dog. And I've always said no to a second. And she said, the only thing I really want is another dog. And the kids started in, can we? And so we were a family trying to heal, so we decided to get another dog. That puppy was 4 months old when my daughter was killed. That puppy saved my family. And I tell you this because as part of our foundation, we've done a few different things now, other than giving money to other organizations. We've started a college scholarship program for kids of all abilities, meaning we give money to kids who are going to go to school for a major where you're going to help others, and you have to have community service hours because Jaime did. We also have another bucket for kids who are going to go to school for a dance major and hopefully some kind of minor in something helping others, and you have to have community service hours, again, because Jaime did. And then the third bucket is for the kids of all abilities. These are kids who grow up requiring all sorts of specialized and expensive care, who may or may not go to traditional post-high school education, and who most people, when they develop scholarship programs, don't include that bucket. We do, because Jaime would have wanted us to. And so that's one thing we do. The other thing, and this gets to the dog, we started an initiative called Paws of Love, where we are now providing, we partnered with a breeder, companion dogs that are 10 weeks old, to families affected by gun violence, and the entire first year. All the food, all the veterinary, all the training, everything that dog would need for the first year, the grooming, everything, we provided. And because we know what our dog meant to us. And so now you know a little bit more about our foundation and why it's called what it's called. With that, I'm going to close with this. My daughter had a quote that she lived her life by as a competitive dancer. She didn't make it up, she found it, but she lived her life by it. And the quote was, dreams and dedication are a powerful combination. And I'll just say this, I am Jaime's voice, and I have a dream of ending gun violence in America, and my life is dedicated to getting that done. I need your help, so thank you for being here.
Thank you, Fred. I have to admit, I didn't read the announcement closely until this morning. My wife, who wasn't able to come, said, "You should be wearing orange." And oh my gosh. So I'm going to do this, Fred. As soon as I get home, I'm going to get, at least on Amazon, I'm going to get an orange shirt, and I'm going to wear it at least once a week. And the second thing I'm going to do is get on the website and give to the orange ribbons for Jaime, which I hope the rest of you will do. So,
website posted around. There's a sign right there.
And also, the Democratic Club will be putting in our newsletter regularly about how you can give. So let's increase that extensively. Okay, we did receive some questions ahead of time. I was going through. Fred touched on a number of things. Well, I apologize if we don't get everyone because he's covered it. And we'll have time for some extra questions. So, Fred, the first one, do you know of any pro-gun activists whose minds have done a complete 180 when presented by a parent or murdered child with the reality of life after such a horrible loss?
Well, I do. I mentioned one, Joe Walsh. But I'll use another example, and he's from Florida, Joe Scarborough. And yeah. So I became connected with Joe Walsh 2.5 years ago. It started with us sort of arguing back and forth on Twitter, but it ended with us having respect for each other and taking the conversation offline to a phone call. We started becoming very public about how much we were talking to one another. Morning Joe found it fascinating. Because we basically were talking as two dads who disagreed but wanted to do something unique and different and save lives. And so 2.5 years ago, on the Friday before that Father's Day weekend, they hosted a conversation between the two of us, which was supposed to be about 5 or 6 minutes. We went about 20. And what was so amazing about the conversation is Joe Scarborough and Joe Walsh kind of took over about 10 minutes of it, talking about how much they agreed in all these different things that they could and would do as legislation to help reduce gun violence. I'll say this. I think most people agree we can and should do more. I also know that a lot of people maybe misinterpret or misunderstand what that is. And so when they hear me talk about reducing gun violence, they think I'm coming after their guns. I'm not. And so my motto in life is really quite simple. It's really easy to talk to people who you agree with, but it's more important and more necessary to talk to those who you have disagreements with and to find that common ground. And whenever I do speak to people who have a different response to this issue than I do, I look forward to the conversations because usually we can find common ground. So thank you.
You're welcome. Next question. We are seeing increasing calls for violence by certain politicians and an overall threat to our public safety with the stockpiling of weapons and ammunition to use against our government or fellow citizens to whom they disagree. How do we move off this platform of lies and onto a platform of facts and action?
So I'll start off by saying this. When my book came out in the spring and I did the book tour, everywhere I went around the country as it relates to the issue of gun violence, my phrase was stop listening to the liars. And it applies to what you just said also. I think we all know who they are. And we spend far too much time reacting to what they say and not to those who are saying the responsible things. The responsible things aren't necessarily as, as sexy to talk about, because it's not as incendiary, and incendiary is newsworthy, but it's also dangerous. And so stop listening to the liars, listen to those saying the responsible things. I am concerned by the fact that we do have a level of weaponry that is being concentrated in a small group of people around this country. But at the end of the day, we all live in this amazing country where we love our democracy and we love our Constitution for a reason, and we have to have faith in the structure of this country, whether it's law enforcement or military or whoever, to make sure we are safe. Taking that into our own hands and preparing ourselves to engage in public shootouts isn't going to solve anything. Remember the date I said to you a little bit ago about doubling our arsenal in this country in 20 years and going from 2% of all sales for AR-15s to 25% in only 20 years. That hasn't made us safer. The end result is more people die of gun violence now than ever have. And so stop listening to the liars who put us in this place. Vote for those who say the quieter, more responsible, more honest things. Vote for those who talk about public safety, not public violence. We can do this. We have to vote, but we will be okay.
Thank you. Some politicians emphasize the mental illness as a cause of gun violence, yet mental health budgets from schools and other institutions have been cut consistently. What do you say to them?
Whenever gun violence happens, saying mental illness is a way of not talking about the fact that there was a gun involved and somebody who never should have had access had far too easy access. It's a way of not talking about the gun part of the equation. Listen, if you have mental illness, you're far more likely to be a victim of gun violence than a perpetrator. Unfortunately, in a lot of these public mass shootings, the person who did it did not have a documented history of mental illness, and so we wouldn't have known. But mental illness is a factor in gun violence. So we have about 40,000 people a year who die of gun violence every year in this country. It used to be 2/3 of that was suicide. The percentage for suicide has come down a little bit, but it's still well above 50. That's mental illness. And we make it far too easy for those who are not just a threat to others, but who are a known threat to themselves, to go out and get the weapon to do it. And let me tell you something. The most certain way of causing yourself or someone else to be killed is with a gun, not another weapon. And so mental illness is a factor. If you know anyone who is suffering, who you think might be a threat to themselves or others, help that person get the help that they need before they act on it.
Thank you. Some politicians think the way to reduce the number of victims in school shootings is to arm teachers. I'm a retired educator, and I think to this day there are no, in the curriculum preparing teachers, there's no course on guns and shooting. What do you say to them?
So, one of the world's dumbest ideas. In fact, just this week, there was an armed security person in a school, I forget which state it was in, who left his gun out in a bathroom. And I will tell you, I have no issues with trained armed security in schools. None. I do have an issue with armed teachers who will act emotionally because they are far too vested in in what's happening with these kids who will react to certain things because they're not trained on security and they'll react the wrong way. But I'm going to answer it also with a statistic. So, many of you came in saying you've seen me on MSNBC and CNN. I wish some of the networks who take a different vantage point on this would have me on as well. Fox News won't. But Newsmax started to. And over the past year, I've done several interviews on Newsmax, but they haven't called me back in quite a while, and here's why. It was over this question. Because they asked me this question, and they didn't expect the answer they got, which kind of put an end to it, which is this. We have about 115,000 schools in America, and to date, there have been just over 400 school shootings only in America. Now, that's a lot of school shootings, but out of 115,000, it's a blip, right? Unfortunately, my daughter got caught up in that. But introducing all of these guns into all of these schools to solve that problem, it won't solve that. What it will do is introduce a whole new element of more guns and more people who are at risk because of that in the schools. So I don't believe the way we tackle that 400 total out of 115,000 is the way to introduce, is with more guns in the hands of more people who are likely to leave them out or behave emotionally. You will end up with more dead kids and more dead educators. If we do this, it's a terrible idea.
I think everyone agrees with that. I knew a number of absent-minded teachers who probably would have left the guns in their drawers, and more students would have had guns than teachers. What gun law reforms, in your opinion, could have the biggest impact in reducing the number of gun deaths per year? What myths and slogans were exposed in your latest book, American Carnage?
So listen, as a myth that I focus on, it's who we are as a country. It's the very first one I take on in the book, because it wasn't always this way. It is literally, we see the impact of the past 20 years, but it really started about 30 years ago, a little longer actually. This is a country that always believed in the rights of gun owners, believed in the Second Amendment, but also believed in gun safety. We always did. And we always had laws to ensure gun safety so that those of us just walking freely didn't have to worry. That started to change in 1977. A guy by the name of Harlan Carter took over the NRA. People didn't know who Harlan was, but he was previously a convicted murderer. But he changed a vowel in his name so no one knew it. And he was the guy who redirected the NRA. And here's the thing, and why it matters. At the time, gun sales were on the decline in America. We no longer had a draft, and hunting was down as a pastime. And so gun sales were down. And Harlan Carter partnered with the industry to start selling more guns. And they created this whole guns for defensive uses platform, which the data does not support. And all of the studies they did back then were bogus and bad. But the myth lived on. And the truth is, you are far more likely to have a gun in your home used on you than by you. Okay? So what they did is from 77 on and through the 80s, they really put a lot of money into kind of dividing America into good guys and bad guys, right? And you've all heard, all the bad guys have guns, so all of us good guys need to have guns. And they spent a lot of years developing that myth very successfully, by the way. They were really good at it. They put a lot of money into elections. They started weakening laws nationally and in states. And the first big consequential change in a gun law that has had significant impact on our lives. Happened here in the state in 2005 with Stand Your Ground. It's not like it's always been this way. You know, this is a really, we have a 20-year problem. And since then, you've seen other states do it. You've seen states passing permitless carry and open carry. None of that makes any of you safer. None of it. And so the first myth is who we are as a country. The Bruin Supreme Court case from last year was a case about a law in New York that was over 100 years old that they overturned. It wasn't some new law that people were arguing over. And I tell you that because we always had laws in this country to deal with this stuff. So, out of what I just told you, one of the slogans that just frosts my you-know-what more than most is this. And you all will know it. I'm going to tell you where it began. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is... You feel like you've lived with that slogan for a long time, right? It started 10 years ago. It's not that long. It started after the Sandy Hook shooting. After Sandy Hook, 5 days after Sandy Hook, Wayne LaPierre came out and gave the NRA response to that shooting. That was the very first time anyone ever said that line. It was their response to the Sandy Hook shooting. They turned that shooting into a gun sales bonanza. That's who they are. It's why I say stop listening to the liars. Listen, responsible, lawful gun owners agree with me. We are on the wrong path. It's why 80 to 85% of America, in every poll you do, says we need to do things differently. You know, we should know who's buying weapons. We should have universal background checks. I believe we should extend that to ammunition. So there is a law in Congress right now called Jaime's Law, named after my daughter, that we are trying to get passed to extend background checks to ammunition. Just so you all know. Again, remember, there's over 400 million weapons in America. And that's what we live with. It is what it is. But we can still make it harder for those weapons to function for people who shouldn't have them. The bad guys. Because here's the thing, the bad guys with guns are the ones who are stealing them, the ones who are going to places like, you know, the gun shows and buying them without a background check. In this country, by law, if you are a prohibited purchaser of firearms, you are also prohibited from buying ammunition. However, there is no requirement for a background check on ammunition. And so you can go and get your gun by stealing it and walk into the store and buy the bullets and nobody will check. If we extend background checks to ammunition, we save lives immediately.
Interesting. Recently, our governor was asked whether he supported background checks, universal background checks, and he said no. And the reason is because the government would be going after people they didn't like.
So remember I said stop listening to the liars?
Yeah. All right, the next question really fits into the last one. When will gun owners and manufacturers be held financially and legally responsible for the damage, carnage they cause?
This is, for me, the #1 thing we can do. I want the tobacco moment with this industry. Following the shooting, my family, we were the only ones to actually sue the gun manufacturer. The reason why all the other families didn't, some didn't think he was worthy, some did, but they were afraid. Because there is a federal law called PLACA, it's a product liability law, which basically gives that industry protections that no other industry has, so that you can't sue it. And if you sue them and you lose, they can then come after you for court costs and all sorts of other things and bankrupt you. And they did that to a few families who tried to sue them after other shootings. Now, in certain states, they have really favorable product liability laws and marketing laws that gave, and Sandy Hook was one of these places, it gave them a path to have a lawsuit go to high enough through the state courts that a plot of lawsuit started to look possible, and the state courts ordered discovery from the gun manufacturers, documents. And so what did the manufacturers do? They decided that was a good time to settle. They didn't want to release the documents. I want the documents. so unfortunately, Florida has a law that's even more onerous than PLACA and terrible liability laws. For me to have filed a PLACA lawsuit, I would have had to first get through the Florida statutes. And I spent the past 5.5 years in court trying to do it. About 4 months ago, that journey came to an end when the Florida Supreme Court threw it out. But I ain't done. So I took what would have been my lawsuit and filed a claim with the Federal Trade Commission. And I am trying to get members of the Senate who have subpoena power to subpoena the executives of these companies, because I want them under oath. What I want is the documents and the testimony that says we knew what we were doing when we expanded the manufacturing and marketing of these weapons. I can literally trace it back to 2008 and the Heller Supreme Court case where they defined a phrase called common use, and show how they went on a business plan, a business strategy to overwhelm our communities with AR-15s, including marketing them to kids. It's all happened in 15 years. In 15 years, this has all happened. And I want them to have to say under oath, with their business documents in front of them, that yes, they knew it, they knew people we love would get killed, and they didn't have any plan to do anything about it. It's going to happen. We are going to get to the truth. So, hang tight.
I have one more question from the ones that were turned in, and then we'll have a few minutes for question, and I have one last question at the end. Have you done any coordination with Moms Demand Action or other groups that promote gun safety?
I'm actually a senior advisor with Brady, and I work with all the groups, actually. I was just speaking in Houston, what day is it, Saturday? I was there Wednesday night. And we had a bunch of my friends from Moms and from Brady and all the groups. And I believe we all need to work together to get this done. For me, again, the organization that I am most deeply connected with is the oldest one in this space, Brady, who I think just does amazing legislative and legal work. But yeah, I work with them all the time.
I hope you're not with Moms for Liberty.
No. They were not popular in this country on election day.
Now we're putting the mic out here. For those of you who want to ask a question, go to the mic.
Right. Please come to the mic stand if you have a question.
Yes. The rest of you go to the mic.
Yeah, okay. My name is Larry Berman. Fred, thank you very much for that presentation. Excellent, excellent. I'd like to know, how do you feel about David Hogg and his campaign for gun violence and the elimination of gun control and elimination of gun violence? How do you feel about him?
Well,
And does he coordinate with you in any way, shape, or form?
listen, I've got to know all of these kids, and I just consider him amongst the group of all of these kids. And some of them have stayed active in the space, and some of them have gone on to do other things. And I knew all of these kids, including David. You know, David's sister and my daughter were friends. I knew all of these kids. And to be honest, before the shooting, I considered them all lost causes because I thought they all lived on their phones. I didn't think any of them knew how to talk, including my kids. And what I got wrong, what I didn't understand is not only do our kids across this country know how to talk, they know what they want, they're fierce in asking for it, and this thing that I thought was ruining them became their weapon. They were able to strategize, organize, and collaborate in ways that none of us saw coming or understood. And so, listen, I think we have amazing young people in this country. You know, whether you agree with, yeah, we really do. Whether you agree with positions of one or another, they're really just impressive. And so my thing for all of our kids is, A, too many of them got caught up in these gap years and stuff, and I tried to tell them all, like, to stop doing that and get on with your education, because we need you in the world leading. But, you know, in my book, Find the Helpers, the last paragraph of my book is a message to our nation's kids. And I talk to them about the fact that in life, you will all have moments, and I think the Parkland kids prove this. You will all have moments, some bigger than others, some amazingly good, some amazingly bad. But what will always matter more than the moment is what you do next. How you respond to your moment when it happens will define you. We see that in the kids across this country. We see that in the Parkland parents who have gone out and to this day have not stopped trying to do something. My brother, who was in the World Trade Center when it collapsed and stayed. Scully, who landed a plane on the water and saved all those lives. We all have our moment. But what you do next is what defines you.
Hi, my name is Josephine Basilco. My nephew is a New York State police officer, and I totally respect the law enforcement community. I was struck, I watched a movie recently about gun violence in this country, and I was struck, the one take home that really struck me was that the NRA in the 70s got a law passed, and I wonder if it's still true. They're federally not allowed, they're not allowed to digitize the information about guns. So the police, who only have 60 days to find out who the gun owner is, have to physically go through all that paper, which is in multiple rooms, to find the gun owner. And if they don't find it, the whole case is thrown out. I feel really horrible the fact that we digitize everything in this world and that they actually, by law, force them not to digitize that information. Is that still true?
It is still true. The ATF, it's worse than that. The ATF, which is the warehouse for all that information, also did not have a committed leader for the past decade. We just got Steve Dettelbach appointed and approved by President Biden last year. He's doing everything he can to modernize the ATF and to make it far more functional at a time where we need it because of the numbers of weapons that we have, but still hamstrung by the fact that all the data and all the documents literally are in boxes on boxes in warehouses. It's still true.
My name is Laura.
Hi, Laura.
This is my personal opinion, so if it isn't yours, at least I'm here to say it. Besides our military, I don't believe there's any person in our country that should have a high performance. departments or the high-performance magazines, or the high-volume magazines. We haven't said anything about that yet today.
Sure.
I do not think that this would cure our problem, but I think it would make a big dent in it.
In my heart, I'm with you. And I would love to see that be the reality. I also know that politically, it is a fight that this country is not ready to have. And so, you know, listen, like I said, in my heart, I agree with you. I also think, for me, my focus has been on getting a whole lot of things done that we really can get done to start reducing gun violence now. The Safer Communities Act that got passed a year ago, it is actually starting to really have results. We're starting to see data come in that's saying maybe we bent the curve. So the executive actions that have been taken, I'm a big believer in, because all these weapons already are out there, as I said, to me the holy grail is actually ammunition, and doing something about that. I agree with you. I think this country is politically right now in a place where I don't put myself in the middle of that fight, because for me to do so probably pulls me away from all the other things that I want to do to lower the gun violence death rate, to lower the instances of gun violence. But I'm not in disagreement with you. Thank you.
My name is Helen Hoffman, and I just want to touch a little bit more on David Hoag's efforts. It's called The Leaders We Deserve, and he's trying to get younger people elected, people that will fight for the rights of the fight against gun violence. He just spent the whole week in Virginia before their elections, and they were able to turn the Virginia legislatures blue. So it's a great organization, and I think that we should have maybe a meeting to learn more about it, because he wants younger people elected, and he's doing a really good job.
No, listen, I think the work of his, and there are other, again, I think our young people are terrific. I think the Leaders We Deserve is great. There's a bunch of others, Voters of Tomorrow, that are doing great work. I think Virginia, though, is a bigger story, because that was a rejection and a repudiation of somebody who was considered a potentially a national figure in Governor Youngkin. You know, everybody was looking at him as being maybe a hope to jump into the presidential race. Not anymore. Listen, it's good news. But Virginia is a story of what happens when everyone shows up, not just the young people, but everyone. Okay? We need to show up. We need to make sure we vote. In Virginia, they had a clear dividing line. They were voting for choice, or they were voting for something far more draconian, and they came out and voted for choice. They also, under the last legislature, passed really important life-saving gun safety legislation. And Youngkin, had he gotten his way with this election, was ready to undo all of that. And so voters, young and old, said, doesn't matter if we love the candidate or not, we need to maintain our freedom to choose and our freedom to be free from gun violence. And they came out and they voted. So listen, I love what Dave and the others are doing to inspire young people, but I am telling all of you, don't wait for the young people to get it done. You all get out there and use it.
Thank you, Fred.
I'm going to ask you one last question about what would you have those of us in this room do, and I'll tell you again, the rest of you, I'm going to go home. The rest of you don't have to buy an orange shirt like I'm going to, but I'm going to wear it now once a week and be able to tell people why I'm wearing it. The second thing I'm going to do when I get home is I'm going to look up orange ribbons for Jaime, and there are signs around the room, and it'll be in a newsletter. But if you're moved like I am to give, and let's see more than a blip in that foundation after. So let's commit to do that and do it regularly. So, is there anything else you'd like us to do, Fred, before we thank you finally?
No, listen. First, thank you for the support. Second, we got another big election coming up in 1 year. So all of our work, it starts now. Okay? A, make sure you all have a voting plan so that you know you can vote and have it counted. B, make sure you're grabbing every single person you know of voting age and making sure that you know they're going to vote. And C, for the next year, use your voice harassing those that are doing the things you're not in agreement with, and use your voice getting out there working for those who are doing the things or will do the things that you want to see done. Your voice matters, your voice counts. This is not a year to sit back and think, I'm just not feeling it. Feel it. Get out there and do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been moved today by the work that Fred has done and continues to do. Let's join him full time. Thank you. And before you leave, our president has something.